Hello and welcome to a swelteringly hot episode of Rennch. If all goes well on this episode, I will finish fabrication of the transmission mounts and show you a super cool sneak preview of what's yet to come on this car at the very end of the episode. Stay tuned. Now, if you tuned into the last episode, I was trying to put the transmission right where it needed to be, but I couldn't really do that without axles. Well, now, I got axles. I've got axles on a hot day. Now that I have these axles from TRE, I don't even know if they're going to fit, to be honest. I think they're very close, like millimeter kind of close. But I think if I move the transmission a little ahead of where it is now, I can get these things to bolt up. If I can get these things to bolt up, I can then make cardboard templates of the mounting plates that I will then weld onto the cross member that I made in the last episode. So, we're gonna go do that. So I'm going to attempt to go bolt these bad boys on. I'm optimistic, but I'm realistic. So you're getting a full shoulder shrug whether it's gonna actually work or not. But let's get down there and find out. I'm gonna try to get this shock out of the way. So I picked up a couple of axles from TRE Motorsports. And it actually just dawned on me, I haven't even told you about TRE Motorsports yet. So I'm going to tell you right now. This is TRE Motorsports. TRE is one of the premier builders and manufacturers of really cool hot rod parts for vintage 911s in the world. Not only do they build some of the coolest cars that have been featured in all the Porsche magazines in the world, but Dave and his team have created some of the really cool bespoke upgrades to hot rod your early 911. Things like big brake kits for your vintage 911, full electronic fuel injection kits, unbelievable interior accessories like custom seats, custom dashboards, you name it, full body transformation kits like 911R kits, 911 RSR kits, and all kinds of really cool, useful widgets that you didn't know you needed until you actually see them. So check out TRE Motorsports. I'm so grateful that they are coming on as a sponsor of the Blasphemy build. And stay tuned, vintage purists. We are cooking up something for headers and exhaust that's going to make you very happy. I want to thank TRE Motorsports for being part of this build. They make some of the coolest cars in the world, and even more so, Dave, the owner, is such a fountain of knowledge and such a nice man that I couldn't be happier that they are associated with this project. So check them out at tremotorsports.com. I'll link them up in the description, but we've got a lot of stuff to talk about from TRE. So let's try to get this axle in and see how it goes. Okay, I've got one end in, but I'm not very close. I'm like a ½ inch off as it pertains to the transmission. I gotta push it that way a little bit, or maybe a little forward. If I can get them both loosely mounted, then I can at least move the thing to where it's permanently gonna be. Ow! So that was literally a pain as I cracked my head on sharp objects multiple times trying to put that thing on. So what I've had to do is modify the axles that I have. The axles that I have locating pins to affix them to the transmission. The G96 transmission does not have flanges that accommodate those, so I just have to cut them off with my angle grinder. I'm gonna do that now and then just kind of put the camera wide angle and suffer through getting this second axle on. Once that's on, then we can start playing around with where the transmission actually lives so I can make the tabs to then weld the mounting brackets on. I'm having some engineering challenges in that area where I have to bolt this thing in. The race-inspired camber adjustments of the rear banana arms or control arms is taking up a whole bunch of real estate that I probably don't need because I'm not going to be doing on-the-fly, camber suspension adjustments with this street car. So I'm going to take you under the car right now and show you what I'm talking about. All right, here we are under the car. You see these boxes? These boxes are super trick, and they enable you to adjust the suspension up and down. That's what they look like. It's kind of a graduated situation. Problem is, this transmission is hitting on most of the stuff. I've got that little ear that's hitting. I've got all kinds of stuff that's really close to hitting here. And even more importantly, these stoppers for my cables, for my shifter cables, this thing is totally in the way. And if I look at the stock OEM 911, the original mounting point for this thing is all the way down here. It's about midway through this torsion tube. So I'm actually going to move the transmission, move it out of the way. I'm going to unbolt these arms and move them down to where they're supposed to be. Then I'm going to see kind of where I am with the transmission, but it is not out of the question that I just lop this entire piece off and put a piece of plate on top, and just that becomes the sort of back to OEM version of this. Hello. So this thing has been relentlessly kicking my butt for a couple of days, and it's because of all this race engineering that's on the car. Originally, all I wanted to do was make some transmission mounts so I could bolt the thing in and move on to the next thing. Problem is, there's so much stuff up in that nose, from the adjustable rear camber plates to these reinforcement bars that have attachment points for your harnesses. It's super complicated in there, and for me to do what I need to simplify the whole thing. So in these builds, you have to sometimes make big, bold decisions, and I've just made one. I'm going to cut all of that stuff out. If you can see, the adjustable rear camber boxes, but the actual factory stock mounting point is at the bottom of those camber boxes. So I need to disconnect the spring plates on each side, move the A-arm or the banana arms down to their OEM spot. I can cut all of that stuff out so that I can then make the transmission mounts. Once those are made, I will grind everything back and reinforce the torsion tube because it's all been cut out. That is a very integral part of the car. It's very structural. So even if it's temporary, I need to put something there so that things don't sort of get weird and buckly. Certainly having the transmission mount be a cross member becomes structural, but I also want to replace something. I might even re-weld a chunk of tube in there for the torsion tube. It depends on how much space I have after I make the transmission mount. So right now we're going bold. We're going to cut all of that stuff away and see what we're left with. right, that was some tough sledding right there. But I got it all cut out. So what I'm gonna do now is jack up the transmission once again, move it to where I want it, and actually start making the transmission mounts, which is what we were doing here in the first place. Okay, I am really close now with the placement of the engine and the placement of the transmission. I'm going to put the banana arms back on and get some semblance of an idea of where the axles are. And if they clear the coilovers, then I'm good to go. I know that as long as I put the forward mounting point on the banana arm, I'm probably going to have to do something about these spring plates. I don't know yet, because when they're in their current state, there's way too much camber, so I think the spring plates are a little bit too short. But I'm going back to the factory mounting position for the front of the banana arms, and I might just ignore the spring plates for now, or just bolt them up loosely, and then again just sort of check to see where the axles are compared to springs, and if they're good, then then we actually begin the transmission mounting process. It's very exciting. I feel like I get dirtier with every update. So I have one side of the suspension on. I finagled it back and forth to get a good idea, I think, of where the transmission's meant to be. I've got it relatively even. So all that's left to do now is actually make a template. So I'm going to start with just a square. And I don't think I can, I'll try to get in there and show you guys what I'm doing, but essentially I've got this piece of square tubing, and I've got this flange that has to go above. Now, this may not end up being the final transmission mount. I say that because I'm looking at my other 911, and the transmission mount that one has, that I'm using the same mounting points, it actually drops about an inch before the transmission mounts to it. So I'm worried that I'm a little bit too high in the chassis now. Now, that being said, I don't have back seats in this car, so it's actually okay that it's a little higher. So we'll see. We'll see how this all goes. Yeah, let's make a template and cut it and weld some stuff. All right, as always, I'm starting with a pretty good stiff piece of cardboard. One thing I'd love to be able to do is, because my hands are dirty, I'd like to be able to get the bolt hole markings accurate. So one of the cool things about this paper, I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can show you. See how there's lines? See those grid lines? That means I can actually cut out. I have almost the exact right, it's like 1 inch by 1 inch. And I can cut it square. So now I've got a notch, and I can notch out where I want this thing to go. Let's trim another ½ inch from here. This is a relatively simple piece. So I pressed hard, and that's what I've got. So that's actually a perfect template for the bolt holes, which is great. So I've got some nice 3/16 plate. I've traced the piece onto here, just like this. And I'm going to clamp it and cut it. I've got my two pieces, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to line these things up with the bar. So the bar becomes kind of the center point, and I'm going to make sure that this corner lines up with this corner. I'm going to actually tack these together. I'm going to run them through the sander so they are literally the exact same size. So I've got it ground down on each side so they're perfect. Then I'm going to pair it up with the template, corner to corner, and drill the holes through each one. That way I know that this corner lines up with the right spot and each hole is exactly where it's supposed to be. Just a quick couple of tacks to keep them together. Then when it's all set, I can grind it off and take the pieces apart. All right, these bad boys are now close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades, as they say. So, time to align it with the template, corner to corner, and then begin the process of drilling out these holes, hopefully in the exact same spot for each one of them. All right, so I have two identical plates. They're still welded together, and they look like that. So I'm gonna go size this up, see if I can get two bolts to go through the transmission. If that works, I will then grind the welds off, bolt them onto the trans, and tack them on. All right, good news, spot on, absolutely spot on. So I'm gonna grind these welds off now and separate this piece. So here's what we got underneath the car. And I've got my magnets. They are setting these things in place. I've got the bolts. The problem is I don't have long enough bolts to go all the way through. And I was just thinking, in terms of making sure that these things are vertical, that I need to get those bolts that'll go through. So I'm gonna grab those bolts first thing tomorrow morning. Okay, next day I have nuts and bolts that will actually go through this transmission. I've got my plates, and this feels like day 46 of this one video, so I'm really excited to get it over with. I'm going to rest, well first measure and make sure everything is centered. Wipe it all down with acetone because that's better for welding. And then put a little squirt of weld on there and should be good to go. So what I'm doing is I'm gonna put two washers on each side, and that's going to space out on each side of the transmission a little bit, like this. Then I'll go through, put them through, well, you'll see. Here we go. Okay. Little acetone wipe down before I weld. This thing is hopefully pretty centered. If not, it's within like a millimeter. Okay. Look how dirty that is. You can't even tell when you're just feeling it. It feels like clean metal, but welds are better with clean metal. Mark on the outside edge. When you have an acetone-soaked cloth, don't start welding. Just did it the other day. I was like, what's burning? So yeah, let's move that out of the way. So with that, I've taken pigeon poop welding to a masterful art form. Anyway, this whole video, this entire week I've spent was just to get to this thing, which is just a crossbar with a couple of brackets on it. It was a long road to go to get here, but it works. It's effective. It's not going anywhere despite my terrible welding. And I don't even know this will be the final iteration of this piece. It's very possible it's not. I'll try to bolt it back up now, and hopefully it fits the way it's supposed to. But I don't, everything's fluid when you have to build a car like I'm building. So I have no idea what's in store for me over the next couple weeks and how things have to move and where they need to go. This was a learning experience, one of which was my welder's not quite powerful enough for this thick material, which is a bit of a bummer. I did my best. I had it cranked up as high as it went, but I didn't really get the penetration that I wanted to. So I just layered it weld on top of weld on top of weld. I'm not even gonna show it to you. That's how bad it is. But let me show you something really cool. I stopped by TRE Motorsports at the beginning of this video, which was crazily like a week ago. And they gave me this really cool bumper. Check this out. So this is super cool. I alluded to this a few videos ago, but this is a rear 911 SC flare. In fact, this one's for the left side. I'm going to be reversing these. So the left rear flare will become my right front flare. And from TRE, I got this really cool ST bumper. So it's flared out on the edges, which is super cool. And you can see, this is so crazy how well this thing fits. When I move this to where it's supposed to be, which is about here, it just sits perfectly for a front flare. So what I'm going to need to do is build out this little section here. But look how cool that's going to be with this front flare. So it's going to have just a little bit of, a little something in the front. And then maybe a little bit more in the rear. Well, with that, that was a titanic task. And thank you guys for hanging in as long as you have. If you've made it this far, throw me a high five in the comments. If you're brand new to this build, this is video number 22. So go back and check out where this thing started, which was this crazy wide body GT2 RSR body kit. Thank you guys so much for watching. Love all y'all. I'll talk to you soon.